Hey everyone, and welcome back to Showbiz Corner. Now if you've been following the history of Showbiz Pizza and the Rock-afire explosion, you've probably heard of the main cast: Billy Bob, Fats Geronimo, Rolf and Earl, Looney Bird. But today, we are not talking about them. Today, we are talking about one of the strangest, most obscure, and honestly most confusing characters ever added to the Rock-afire explosion. A character that some people barely remember, some people wish they forgot, and some people didn't even know existed. His name is Uncle Klunk. Now before we get into why Uncle Klunk is so weird, we need a little context. Because the Rock-afire explosion wasn't just a static band. It was constantly evolving. Aaron Fechter and creative engineering were always experimenting, adding new characters, testing ideas, and trying to push the technology further. And Uncle Klunk was one of those experiments. Uncle Klunk was introduced in the early days of Showbiz Pizza. And right away, he stood out. Because unlike the rest of the cast, he didn't look like an animal. He was human. Well, kind of. And that alone made him feel out of place. Because the Rock-afire explosion had a very specific vibe. It was a band of exaggerated, cartoonish animal characters. A gorilla on piano, a bear on guitar, a sarcastic bird in a barrel. And then, suddenly, you've got this strange, humanoid character sitting on stage like he wandered in from a completely different show. But it wasn't just his appearance. It was his personality. Uncle Klunk was usually portrayed as a talk show host type character. Kind of goofy, kind of awkward, and honestly, kind of unsettling depending on the performance. He had this strange, almost clueless energy. Like he was trying to be entertaining, but never quite landing the joke. And that's part of what made him so memorable. Because he didn't feel polished. He felt weird. In a way that didn't quite match the rest of the band. Now here's where things get really interesting. From a technical standpoint, Uncle Klunk was actually one of the most advanced animatronics creative engineering ever built. This thing could do things the other characters couldn't. He had more complex movements, more interaction with props. He could pick things up, hold objects, even perform small actions that required a higher level of control. In some shows, he would interact with things like a phone or random props, which doesn't sound like much now. But at the time, that was a big deal. So you've got this character who is more advanced, more complex, more capable. And yet, he's also the one that people remember as the weirdest. And that's the contradiction. Because technically, he was impressive. But creatively, he didn't quite fit. Another interesting detail is that not every Showbiz location had an Uncle Klunk. Some stores kept the standard setup with Rolf and Earl, while others swapped them out and installed Klunk instead. So depending on where you grew up, you either remember him very clearly, or you've never seen him at all. Which adds to the mystery. Because for a lot of fans, finding out about Uncle Klunk later feels like discovering some kind of lost character. Like, wait, this was real. And honestly, that reaction makes sense. Because even compared to the already weird world of the Rock-afire explosion, Klunk stands out. Now as time went on, and especially as concept unification started rolling out, characters like Uncle Klunk didn't really have a place anymore. The company was moving toward a more standardized, controlled brand. And Klunk was the opposite of that. He was experimental, unpredictable, a little too strange. So like many parts of the Rock-afire explosion, he was eventually phased out. But here's the thing. Even though Uncle Klunk wasn't around for very long, he left an impression. Because he represents something important about Showbiz Pizza. The willingness to try weird ideas, to experiment, to push things further than they needed to go. And sometimes those ideas worked, and sometimes they didn't. But that's part of what made the Rock-afire explosion so unique. It wasn't safe. It wasn't predictable. It was constantly changing. And Uncle Klunk is probably the best example of that. So was he a good character? Honestly, that depends on who you ask. Some people think he's fascinating, a hidden gem of animatronic history. Others think he's just weird. and not in a good way. But either way, he's unforgettable. And in a world full of animatronic bands, that's saying something. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen Uncle Klunk before? Did your local Showbiz have him? Or did you only find out about him later? And more importantly, do you think he was actually a good addition? Or just a strange experiment that didn't work? Let me know in the comments. I read all of them. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and stick around, because we've got a lot more deep dives into the Rock-afire explosion and Showbiz history coming up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep the Rock-afire spirit alive.